I spent 10 days at altitude in the Pyrenees mountain range, living and running in an area known as Font Romeu. This video will explore my time training there, focusing in particular on 3 of the sessions: a 6-mile trail run, a track session, and a 5-mile run in the mountain snow, attempting to answer the fascinating question of whether just 10 days of running with less oxygen is enough to improve one's running. For this, I spoke with University Professor Charlie Pedlar. Charlie holds a PhD in the effects of altitude training on distance runners, and at the end of this video, I will ask him that key question. Is 10 days enough to see anything at all, or do you think at that point it's just not long enough? Well, the full conversation with Charlie is also an episode of the JOG On podcast, and if you wish to delve further into this subject, I'd highly recommend checking it out. I'm Harry Morgan, and you're watching JOG On. I dive straight into my chat with Charlie by first asking him this important question. What are some of the benefits one might see from altitude training?
Well, the whole premise behind altitude training is to try to boost the amount of oxygen carrying capacity you have in the blood. If you can do that, then it's like a superpower for endurance athletes. You're going to be able to sustain much higher running speeds for longer periods of time. So it's really an attempt to get that through a natural means.
So today's session is just a 6-mile run, fairly steady, and it's around a lake which is at 1400 meters altitude.
Roughly what are those boundaries? Do we have an exact meterage for what low, moderate and high are?
If you get to above about 1,000 meters, then you're kind of into that moderate altitude zone. Realistically though, it's more like sort of 12 to 1,500 meters before you start to get an impact. To get a proper altitude response, normally people are trying to get up towards around 1,600, 1,700 or around 2,000 meters altitude.
It's quite a flat loop compared to some of the trails and hills around here. So it's just about holding consistent pace in this kind of session.
What happens is when you go up to altitude, the air is thinner, there's less atmosphere pushing down on you that pushes the oxygen into your blood. So what happens is the body compensates by producing many more red blood cells. The idea is that when you come back down to sea level, is that you've got that extra capacity to be able to sustain fast running speeds.
If you look up just over my shoulder there, you can see those white streaks on the mountain. Those are actually the remnants of quickly melting ski slopes. Morning. Irish athletes there, you could tell from the accent. I said morning, they went morning.
On the subject of acclimatization, seeing as we brought it up, how long does it take an athlete to acclimate? How long do they have to spend before their body starts to get to a point where they feel like they can, first of all, get the benefits, but also start to get their fitness where they can push themselves a little bit if they need to?
Great question. I mean, when you go into an altitude room or you travel straight to altitude, there's an immediate effect. But then gradually, as you acclimatise over a few days to a week, those responses will all settle down, and then you start that slow process of building more red blood cells that can take several weeks to really have a measurable impact. We're dabbling in very short periods of time at altitude, which I know you want to talk about. It's a timeline that starts minutes to hours and goes on to lifespan.
What? Tree down. An interesting thought. Even though we're at the lower end of altitude training here at Font Romeu at 1400 meters, that is still 55 meters higher than the highest point in the whole of the UK, the summit of Ben Nevis.
One of the outcomes you'd be looking for is a better running economy off the back of altitude training camps. That's certainly something that's going to help you, especially with the long distance events like 10k upwards.
Oh, and that's it, run done. 9.6 kilometers or 6 miles. Average pace was 4:36 kilometers. A little bit sharp. I think I've just been a little bit inspired by all the insane people out here. Such gifted runners and work so hard for it. Total time 44 minutes and 6 seconds. Whew!
When I was in Font Romeu, my general approach, so I was there for 10 days, trained about 8 days out of 10, had 2 rest days. Most was steady running, one was a tempo run that was pretty quick, and one was a track session. And I want to draw your attention, probably in particular, to the track session. Driving towards the highest track I'd ever been to, we walked through the entrance, paused to play table football, and then made our way over to the track itself.
Apparently to get to this track, you have to go through a construction site. So this is the athletics track at Font Romeu.
I've run on a track since the age of 12, but every one of those times I had the convenience of some oxygen available.
The air is thin.
This would be different. The reps that we did, one of the big things I noticed was that when we stopped, when you do a lot of track work, as I'm sure you know, you get very used to knowing what your recovery is. Once you've done a 400 meter, you know about when your heart rate's coming down, when that breath, and it just wasn't happening as quickly. Is that a common sign and of my body? I was really breathing deeply and gasping.
The air is thin up here. Camera going back in the bag. Fair few more reps to do and I need to be able to breathe.
It's that breathing part that is so important, and it goes back to the basic physiology of endurance running in that you've got these 2 main systems that you use. One is powered by oxygen, the other one steps in to help and when there's not enough oxygen available. And that's what's happening there, and what happens as a result is you get really high breathing rates to try and get as much oxygen in as you can, but you're having to rely on these anaerobic sources of energy.
To give you a sense of how fast fast an Olympian comes past on a track session, we were running 80-second laps here, which equates to 16:40 5k pace. Watch how fast they overtake us, making my speed look positively pedestrian.
Hi, Steph. Nice joke. Steph 12 there, absolutely flying around.
On a running track as well, you're going to notice that between reps, it's going to take longer to recover.
Take the camera with me just for this final 400 and that'll be it. I'll hold 80 seconds flat for everyone, try and do it again, but it is tough.
We began our final 400 rep with the urgency of a group who wanted to finish this painful endeavour. Down the back straight into the final bend was where it burnt, in particular the lungs, which heaved to draw in enough breath to sustain the effort. And that was the 400s over. The time was
78 seconds, a little bit quicker, but dear Lord, it's like someone's taken your fitness and turned it down by about 20-25%.
It's just like stepping up the load, really, and you have to adjust everything while you acclimatise, and it gradually gets better over a number of weeks.
These guys absolutely flying. It really hits you here in the chest. The altitude's getting to my head.
One thing I want to ask you, Charlie, is I went there as an 18-19 minute 5k runner, notches and notches down from this kind of elite level.
Yeah.
So if you take someone like me or someone who's running, you know, a 24-minute, 25-minute park run, do you think altitude training could ever be a part of someone's training for the common person if they've got the finances to do it? Or do you think there are other factors they should be looking at way before that, whether that be weight management, general fitness and training? Are there lots of other boxes you should be ticking, and this is just like the icing on the cake, if you like?
That's a really interesting question, because I think you've got to be pretty committed to your sport to invest in altitude training. It can be expensive, and often you're kind of compromising on the running terrain as well. Mountainous areas don't always have enough flat trails.
That's very true, yeah.
I think to invest in that at that level is probably just doing more training and doing it well at sea level is probably going to be more effective.
Come on, Harry! Come on, Harry!
When I was out there, I was surrounded by very high level runners, and as much as I was there to document as well, there was a part of me that thought that and thought, well, you know, would my time be better invested in shedding the 5 kilograms I've got to lose? You know what I mean?
I'm not practicing steeplechase. That was the end of the session. That was tough. Let's go on, no, nice Katie. On Ethan. Go on, Emily.
And then, after glorious sun, just as we got to the car park, the skies opened up and it poured with mountain rain.
Well, we're just coming back from the track and the heavens have opened up. Some of the heaviest rain we've seen in Font Romeu so far. Bye, Pippa.
I did 3 gym sessions whilst out there. Again, didn't push myself too hard, and anything I did that was a bit more cardio based, a little bit of cross training, a little bit on the ski erg and stuff, I again noticed it very quickly. In terms of the actual strength training, would anyone adapt that at all? Would you take it slightly easier because the muscles might be more fatigued?
My immediate response is that you can pretty much carry on with your normal sea level strength training program at sea level and altitude. Now, you're right to think about that whole training volume and how you might adjust things, but generally altitude is not going to impact on that too much. There is a school of thought that doing strength training in altitude can offer an additional benefit because it does stimulate some proteins to be expressed that might help with strength as well as with endurance, but it's quite a thin evidence base, I'd say, around that.
Interesting,
so from a research perspective, there's not a whole lot of evidence that it works.
As there is with the actual endurance training and its the effects of altitude. My last day of running in Font Romeu saw something unexpected, a snow day.
Snowed a bit last night, and now this is our car.
Driving to the lake that morning, we were met with a glorious wintry scene of snow-covered trees.
3 weeks of altitude or even a week of altitude training can have benefits that make you a better athlete and learn about your body and learn about your physiology that can last a whole career.
So here we go, this is the final run here out in Font Romeu, and amazingly we have a blanket of snow. Let's do this. One of the odd things about this run is I keep hearing these loud thuds as large sections of snow all of a sudden just fall out of the trees suddenly. Just hoping one doesn't land on my head.
And then, perfectly timed, a snowfall happened right in front of me.
This is crazy!
We know that success in endurance performance is related to if they're healthy and well and they can train, they know how good they can be. It's just about consistency of training and for a long period of time. And so the more cycles of training they can kind of string together, the more likely they are to succeed.
The socks are getting a little bit wet. That slush, as you stamp in it, does start to go through the shoe. Nice grip, because I've got the trail shoes on. Woo! Just blanket white snow stretching up to the base of the mountains over there. Not that you can see those mountains. Oh, I'm out of breath.
So I think it probably builds us to one of the main questions I had for you today, Charlie, which is that I spent 10 days in the Pyrenees in Font Romeu, had a brilliant time, first time ever really properly altitude training. I'd been running while skiing and was kind of aware I'm running at altitude. And that training varied from running around a lake at 1,400 meters, that was the lowest we went, up to about 1,900. Be as absolutely honest as you like, and from the sounds of this I already feel like maybe I know where it's going, but is 10 days enough to see anything at all, or do you think at that point it's just not long enough?
Well, You would certainly see those acute acclimatization effects over that first week, but then just as you're starting to kick in that longer, slower adaptation effect, it's time to leave. So it's going to be limited. I mean, it's probably not completely useless, but certainly in terms of the tests that we have to measure a difference, you wouldn't expect to see anything after 10 days, really.
Look at this.
I appeared to be in a race against the melting snow.
Starting to flow down this path. Better get going before it turns into a river.
Traditionally, it's been that 3 weeks, like 21 days, that's been banded around as kind of a minimum altitude training time to get a measurable effect anyway. If you're running better off the back of it, you could well attribute that to a stint at altitude. So it's so individualized.
Bit of a lump of snow here. Let's see what it does. Here's that same tree that fell down. Look at it now. Oh man, let's hope no trees fall on me. That really would be bad. There's all sorts of obstacles on this run.
Potentially about double what I did, so maybe 20, 21 days plus, as that sort of minimum line would be certainly a more measurable adaptation.
Amazing landscape. Someone's built a little snowman on the dam. How lovely. Bye-bye. Look at the dam.
In just a few days, it had totally changed in appearance.
What a run here in Font Romeu in the snow.
And those 10 days I went through, in your opinion, were probably more likely that my body was just starting to get used to what's happening, and I was just maybe beginning that process, is what you're saying, of starting to acclimatise, maybe have some physiological adaptations, but
yeah, exactly.
Just the very beginning.
Font Romeu, there's enough different runs and things to do there, maybe to keep it interesting for a month or so, but then you probably need a change as well.
5 miles exactly. That was absolutely wonderful.
Well, Charlie, it's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. A really interesting and just a pleasure to hear about it. And also just to give the video some more context that I'm putting out on the main YouTube channel about my 10 days at altitude. It gives it a professional element and actually an educated voice that I cannot bring other than just me blabbering on in the mountains isn't enough, in my opinion. I want to give a bit of education with it. Charlie, well, I wish you all the best with your future career. You're a very knowledgeable person. It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. And thanks very much for the advice.
Oh, you're welcome.
If you ever get a chance to come to altitude, give it a go, but do go easier on those longer reps because it's tough. I'm Harry Morgan at a track at altitude in Font Romeu, and this is Jog On.